I don't really want anyone to be grounded in the way that I have. I would love for an aviation worker to come into the industry and have a long-term career in an industry that's compatible with the climate science. But at the moment, obviously, that isn't happening. They're on a growth trajectory. So what we're saying is if we do less now, then we might actually have a budget left when in 15 or 20 years' time, we have a next generation of aircraft. If we can scale green hydrogen, if there's enough renewable energy to do that.
Welcome to the Mongabay Newscast. I'm your co-host, Mike DiGirolamo.
And I'm your co-host, Rachel Donald.
Bringing you weekly conversations with experts, authors, scientists, and activists, working on the front lines of conservation, shining a light on some of the most pressing issues facing our planet, and holding people in power to account. This podcast is edited on Gadigal land. Today's guest on the newscast is Todd Smith, an ex-airline pilot and co-founder of Safe Landing, an organization of aviation industry workers advocating for a just transition of the aviation industry to adapt to the realities of climate change. In this exchange, Smith details the moments that led him to leave the airline industry, partly influenced by a medical grounding and partly from witnessing the impacts of climate change on a glacier in Peru. You may have heard the fact that if aviation were a country, it would be in the top 10 global emitters of CO2. However, Smith explains how a tiny global few emit the bulk of carbon emissions from flying, and how and why the industry needs to change now to ensure long-term sustainability and employment of aviation workers.
Todd, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us on Mongabay.
Thank you, Rachel. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Now, you've got an absolutely fascinating story, which I hope that you will delight us with in full. And that is how you left the aviation industry after having this moment of kind of coming to awareness of the severity of the climate problem and obviously the aviation's involvement in that. And that has led you down the line to create an organization to help aviation workers leave the industry. But before we get there, I would really love if you could tell us that story in full. How was it that you came to have this moment of awareness and leave the industry?
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, I guess growing up on a council estate in the suburbs of Greater London, my dad was a builder and he told me to always do a job that I'd enjoy. So this idea that, work can be tough and I should do something I would enjoy was instilled in me from a very young age. And I went to watch an air show at the age of 5. It was called Southend Air Show, and the Royal Air Force displayed their prestigious red-arrowed aerobatic display team, 9 aircraft flying in close formation. And in that moment of seeing everyone at the age of 5 just stop what they were doing in absolute awe of these jets, flying in formation, it just captured me in such a big way from such a young age. And I just thought, well, they look like they're having fun, and that's what I want to do. I actually wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I think I was largely influenced by the military-industrial complex, Hollywood Top Gun type films as well. And so I set my heart on becoming a pilot. And that dream at times in my youth felt like a very distant reality. Like I had undiagnosed ADHD. I wasn't really hitting the grades that were required of the Royal Air Force, which was a prestigious, you needed to be the elite. In a way, you needed 6 straight A's, and you probably needed I felt like I needed to be from a different family to the one I was born into, which was a little bit like a chip on my shoulder, I suppose. But nonetheless, I tried to pursue that dream. I was in the Air Cadets at the age of 12, which was a year before I was actually supposed to be there. I was flying with Royal Air Force instructors in the Air Cadets doing aerobatics at the age of 14. And for some reason, it just seemed like I was really good at it. Like intuitively, my first ever loop-the-loop on the way down, I hit the turbulence that I created on the way up. And, I was recommended for a flying scholarship by this Royal Air Force instructor. And I was elated, but also feeling like, how could I possibly be a Royal Air Force pilot? That sense of not being good enough, not feeling good enough. And nonetheless, I carried on. I had a flying lesson as well for my 12th birthday, my parents paid for. And, as I could see the dream slipping away in my teenage years, I kind of looked to the military to see if I could sign up to the army and work my way up through the Air Corps to become a helicopter pilot. And there wasn't any vacancies, and so I didn't take that route in the end. But I did various jobs. I went into becoming an electrician and was bouncing around between jobs in London, feeling like an absolute failure, if I'm honest. And then I started to look at the commercial airline route, which I'd never even considered in the past. And I got a personal loan out and started my private pilot's license in the UK. And that was about 2021 then. It was just off the back of a 2008 recession. So an interesting time to be taking out loans. And the interesting thing about becoming a commercial pilot is it's about £130,000. That's how much debt I got into to pay to train. And unlike a student loan, there's no help from the government. It's not considered like any form of educational career. You might as well be learning to drive a lorry. So anyway, I embarked on that journey, and my family could see how much I wanted to do it. And even though they were very limited in the financial support that they could offer me, my grandma actually moved in with my parents and helped me out. So my whole family came together. I was working part-time for 5 years, and I got through my commercial airline training. I passed all my flight tests first time and minimum hours. The academic stuff was really hard, but I committed myself to it. I gave up my social life and I got it, and I did well at it. And so because there was no jobs in the industry off the back of a 2008 recession, I decided to go straight into becoming a flying instructor because I needed to build hours. I was actually going to get paid to fly for once, the first time in my life. So I worked as a flying instructor, giving back to the industry, teaching people to land and take off for the first time. It was great fun. Absolutely no money in it, but I really enjoyed the job. And it was no way I'd be able to pay off my flight training debt doing that. So I was desperate to get into the airlines. And after a couple of years, I finally got a break onto the Airbus A320, which is like almost a 200-seat aircraft. And, very common sort of medium haul, short to medium haul aircraft around the world. And I started off with a Bulgarian company. I was flying out of Iceland in Keflavik, and that was absolutely amazing to be flying that sort of technical aircraft and just a feeling of it. And you go through all the simulator training. When your first flight, after that, you do some takeoff and landings with an empty jet, and then the next flight you've got passengers on board. And I landed at Gatwick for the first time with like 200 passengers on board. I'd only flown that aircraft twice, and so it was everything about it. I just loved everything about it. It was just amazing. And then I got up, that company went bust after the first year, so I managed to get a job with Thomas Cook, which was a 178-year-old company. And it was just, I felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. Like, to get a job with them, I knew the world was my oyster. So I had everything set up for a long-term career in aviation, and I was a senior first officer. And what happened was I lost my medical. I had some gut trouble, but 6 months before that, I'd gone and taken myself off to Peru for the first time in South America. I'd done a solo backpacking trip. And up until that point, Rachel, I'd never really, obviously I knew on some level aviation wasn't necessarily good for the planet, but I didn't understand anything about the climate crisis. And I wasn't politically engaged in any way either. And I'd never been sort of backpacking and somewhere like South America, but went off to Peru and went on to Machu Picchu and did this amazing track. I met the Quechua community that had escaped the Spanish colonization of that land up in the mountains. And there was an opportunity after Machu Picchu to go into a place which had recently been so-called discovered, called Rainbow Mountain. And the reason it had only been discovered recently is because all the snow had melted on top of this mountain. And this mountain was 100 meters lower than Everest Base Camp. It was super high, like 17,000 odd feet. So I decided to go up there for the day, and we've got the minibus up and then walk the last summit. And I'm up there looking at this beautifully colored Rainbow Mountain. And I couldn't help but feel how bittersweet it was that, yes, I can see this beautifully colored rainbow rock formation, which was underneath the snow, but the snow should still be there. And the guide was telling me, a Peruvian guide was telling me that Peru was one of the first countries to be impacted by the climate crisis. And I was just like, what? what's he talking about? And what I now know in retrospect, is that that was the first seed that was planted, and I was witnessing in that moment climate change and mass tourism firsthand. And I guess after that trip, I went into the Amazon jungle and just felt the whole aliveness of the jungle, drifting down the Amazon River one evening and looking up at the Milky Way. And I couldn't really go back from that experience.
Thanks for tuning in to listen to the first few minutes of this podcast. To hear the full conversation, find the Mongabay Newscast wherever you get your podcasts from and click subscribe. You can also get each new episode straight to your inbox by subscribing to Mongabay's weekly newsletter at mongabay.com. And if you really want to support us, you can donate to our Patreon at patreon.com/Mongabay. Thanks for listening.